Good day, ma'am. Good day to all of my fellow classmates. I am Sember Castle Caracas, taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English. For today's learning, I will discuss the criteria for textbook evaluation. In situations where there is a shortage of trained teachers, language teaching is very closely tied to the textbook. This doesn't mean, of course, that the method of demonstrated in the textbook is always faithfully reflected in the method as practiced by the teacher. It is ironical that those teachers who rely most heavily on the textbook are the ones least qualified to interpret its intentions or evaluate its content and method. The textbook can be tyrant to the teacher who, in his or her preoccupation with covering the syllabus, feels constrained to teach every item in exactly the same sequence and context in which it is presented by the textbook writer. So, any textbook should be used judiciously since it cannot cater equally to the requirements of every classroom setting. In bilingual and multilingual situations, there are special limitations on the amount of English language teaching that can be done via textbook. The textbook can present examples of common difficulties, but there are problems specific to different language groups which are left for the teacher to deal with. It is also likely that textbook will outlast its relevance because of changes in the language policy of the community for which it was written. As we proceed, we will go to the focus of this topic, which is the scheme for evaluation. These are the four assumptions on which the scheme is based. First is up-to-date methodology. The ESL, or English as a Second Language, textbook should be consistent with the methodology, the psychological and linguistic principles underlying current accepted methods of second language teaching. But textbook writers should not jump aboard the bandwagon of innovation for the sake of it. Second is guidance for non-native teachers. Textbook should provide appropriate guidance for the teachers of English who is not a native speakers of English, the untrained or partially trained teachers who does not possess native-like control over all aspects of English should not be left in any doubt concerning the procedures proposed by the textbooks. Otherwise, he or she may, for example, teach only the meanings of the minimal per live, completely ignoring the writer's intention that these items should be used for pronunciation practice. Then third is needs of second language learners. Catering to the needs of the second language learner can be a complex task in a multilingual setting. ESL textbook writers have their work cut out when pupils in the same class speak many different mother tongues, and when English is not the second but third or even the fourth language. Also to be reckoned with is the distinction in which some cases has to be made between English as a subject and English as the medium of instruction. The last, fourth, is relevance to the socio-cultural environment. There are second language problems in learning vocabulary and syntax that arise from difference between the cultures associated with the target language and the mother tongue. In certain gray areas of usage, acceptability may best be determined by reference to socio-cultural norms. ESL textbook writers need to be sensitive to shifts in usage that are due to the worldwide spread of English. In Figure 1, the criteria under the heading Linguistic Pedagogical involve techniques of textbook presentation as well as selection and organization of skills and aspect of the language to talk. Whether a textbook is written for first or second language speakers, it has to be assessed in terms of the following criteria: the completeness and appropriateness of the items presented, the activities suggested for practicing the items selected, the sequencing of vocabulary, particularly the functional load, rate, and manner of entry and re-entry, and the relevance of its context and situations, and so on. These criteria are derived from a combination of the linguistic and pedagogical components of language teaching analysis. General criteria embrace global considerations of methodology, the needs of the learner, the teacher, and the community. Technical criteria are concerned with the quality of editing, publishing, the availability of supplementary materials, cost, and durability of the text, authenticity of language and styles of the writer, etc. The scheme can be adapted to suit particular context. For example, our assumptions about the non-native teacher, the needs of the learner, and the socio-cultural environment cannot be the same in Nigeria as in Malaysia, where English is a second language but not the language of instruction. Indeed, the approach to English language teaching in Malaysia cannot be the same now as it used to be up until 1969 when Bahasa Malay became the language of instructions. The different purposes for which English is used must be reflected in the selection, graduation, presentation, and teaching of language items. As we go for more knowledge, we will tackle the checklist of items. The scheme for evaluation can be used to draw up a checklist of items. Each cell in Figure 1 would generate principles relevant to a particular criterion or assumption. For example, the cell relating reading with assumption 3 needs of L2 learners would produce a principle such as reading passages should be relevant to the mother tongue experience of the pupils. The following 7 principles derive from the cells relating assumption to guidance for non-native teachers with general linguistic, pedagogical, and technical criteria. The ESL textbook should first give introductory guidance on the presentation of language items and skills, which is pertaining to general. Second is suggest aids for the teaching of pronunciation, phonetic system, which is speech. So, move on for meaningful situation and a variety of techniques for teaching instructional units, which is pertaining to grammar. The next is distinguish the different purpose and skills involved the teaching of vocabulary. It's pertaining to itself, vocabulary. Next is to provide guidance on the initial presentation of the passages for reading comprehension. It's pertaining to reading itself. So, next is to demonstrate the various devices for controlling and guiding content and expressions in composition exercises, which is pertaining to writing. Then, let's move on to the last. Contain appropriate pictures, diagrams, tables, etc. So, it's technical. So, the sample checklist for evaluation appendix is not meant to be exhaustive. Items on it group for convenience under logical headings were generated in the same way, and teachers can evolve their own sets of criteria for different educational levels or language teaching situations. the column for weighting on the left of the checklist and the columns for rating to the right can be used for adapting items to suit the particular demands of teaching situation. So weighting can be indicated by numbers or letters. Very useful, quite useful, fairly useful, not useful. The weighting of individual items or groups or items depends on the level of the pupils, primary or secondary, and the objectives of the curriculum. The evaluation of the primary textbook would emphasize technical criteria such as choice of typeface, colorful illustrations, and the use of each live workbook in context where English is medium of instruction. An important criterion would be that textbook should provide balanced and systematic training in all language skills. It is vital that the teacher takes over where the textbook leaves off, and he or she must be able to assess its strength and weaknesses. English language teachers in training need to be acquainted with the principle of textbook evaluation. They can be given practice in analyzing textbooks in order to find out whether the organization of materials is consistent with the objectives of given English language curriculum. When training teachers examine the selection of items of speech, grammar, and vocabulary in a textbook and evaluate the way it presents reading and writing activities, they are at the same time improving their competence in the language and honing their skills as teachers. Textbook is a tool, and the teacher must know not only how to use it, but how useful it can be. Finding out will involve distinguishing between method and the use of printed materials and method in face-to-face teaching. It will involve using discretion in adapting textual materials to the needs and interests of pupils, choosing only those materials and methods which are based on sound linguistic and pedagogical principles. The textbook will continue to play an important role, but it will not be a tyrant. Thank you.